Cheers, I do, buckaroos, and how the heck are you? I am trying the Whiskey Whisper, at least for the purposes of this video anyway. So here's what I decided to try a new, or start a new video series, cocktails. Thought I'd start with a classic cocktail. I had to adjust myself there a little bit. Because I have to start with a classic cocktail and then do a riff or two on the style. To start the series, we're going to start with a Manhattan. So here's what I did, is basically a classic Manhattan. I started with a rye. Union Horse Distilling Reunion Straight Rye Whiskey. This one at 121.4. You don't necessarily need to use a rye this big, but I do recommend at least a 90 proof rye. And personally, I prefer at least 100 when you're doing a cocktail like this. This is a whiskey forward cocktail. You're going to taste the whiskey. So there are those that will ask, Tom, why use a fine whiskey in a cocktail? Well, the truth is your cocktail is only going to be as good. I haven't even had anything to drink yet and I can't talk. Imagine, one more time with feeling, your cocktail is only going to be as good as the products that you put in them. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to go all the way to the top shelf, but I do recommend using a quality product. Use at least a product that you would drink neat, in my opinion. When doing a cocktail like this anyway, a whiskey forward cocktail or a booze forward cocktail like a Manhattan, an old fashioned, a martini, again, it's only going to be as good as the ingredients you put in it. When you're going to taste that product, you want to make sure you're using a good product. So again, I use that Reunion Rye, 2.5 ounces, about 3/4 ounce sweet vermouth, and I just use traditional Angostura bitters. Like I said, we're making this one right to classic directions, I guess, or right to classic recipes, let's say. And I've got it chilled using a classic Manhattan style glass. And anybody that knows me knows that I like to kind of change things up. And I want to do that, but I wanted to start with a classic version of the style. Then I'll make some changes and tell you why I made those changes. This tastes like a classic Manhattan. Again, I can taste that rye because I'm using a very good quality rye. I'm using the classic Angostura bitters. I'm using a quality sweet vermouth. Again, ingredients matter. When you're making food for your family, you're probably not using the cheapest ingredients available. You want to use good products. You can be frugal and still buy good products. I'm not really in this nice rustic cabin, but I thought it made a nice, nice background. It is snowing there, and we have a snow day as I speak, as I do this video. Well, we had more of an ice day. They call it a snow day, but yeah, it was rather treacherous today, so they called it. So I'm not even getting out of my moose pajamas today. I'm staying warm and comfy. But I was semi-productive. I got up and made some breakfast, although I did kind of cheat a little bit. Kind of a poor folk comfort food. I doctored up a can of roast beef hash. Made some nice hash patties. And then for our lunch snack, we went with some crab salad. Wife had been wanting some crab salad, so we made that. So we're gonna kind of cheat today. Kind of do things the easy way today. Except when it comes to the cocktails. You want to make them right. So in the past, I've done different things with this cocktail. So I'm looking at different things to do with this Manhattan. And I'll go over that with each drink. But as I'm drinking this classic, I'm looking at what I have available here, thinking, okay, what direction do I want to take this? Now, there are those that will tell you have to use a rye. Well, you don't. A bourbon is just fine. However, I would use a classic bourbon, if not a high rye bourbon, at least a classic bourbon that uses rye as a secondary. I wouldn't use a wheated bourbon in a cocktail like this. I think it makes it too sweet and too soft. A drink like this isn't meant to be sweet, despite what the name sweet vermouth might imply. The sweet vermouth does add some sweetness, yes, but it also adds some acidity, so you need that balance. So if you're going to change the cocktail, you have to keep that in mind as well. But I have some bourbons here I'm looking at that I'm thinking about doing a cocktail with next, and then some other ingredients and various bitters as well. I didn't realize I was out of my classic orange bitters, so I'll have to get another bottle of them to replenish. I thought I still had some left, but guess I got used. My daughter found a deal on some classic Angostura a while back, so I've got like bar size of Angostura, so I'm never going to run out of those. I even gave one of the bottles, came in a 3-pack, I gave one of the bottles to a friend. Hey, find a use for it. It's bitters. It's going to last forever. It's like that Spam joke. They've just started making the second batch. Anyway, Spam and Twinkies will last forever. Oh, mercy. Ants, Spam, and Twinkies are the only thing that's going to make it through Armageddon. The ants will have plenty to eat if they can figure out how to open that can. Anyway, I digress. This is beautiful. It is just a classic version of the cocktail, right? You know, no frills. But like I said, I am using a good quality rye to start with, and then your classic Angostura bitters, as well as sweet vermouth. Again, you know, I didn't want to stray from the classic recipe for the first one, and then I want to do at least one, if not two, versions of, and tell you why I decided to do them that way, or why I think it works. Again, the thing is, if you're thinking Manhattan, if I change certain ingredients, will it still be a Manhattan? Well, probably not, and it kind of depends on who you talk to. But it doesn't mean you can't use that classic cocktail recipe as a template to go off and make your own signature cocktail. Just keep in mind, though, that if you're taking out the sweet vermouth completely, the product that you add needs to do about the same thing, right? You still need to add a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of acidity. Or you can keep the sweet vermouth in and add another product, as long as those products are compatible. But here's the thing. Here's the thing you never know until you try. And I do the same thing when I cook. Is you never know until you try. You never know if you have an idea. Okay, this might work. Hey, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it doesn't hurt to try. And the same thing with cocktails, man. I encourage folks to not look at these recipes like they were handed down from God to Moses on stone tablets. Take it as a template to really go off from there and create your own signature cocktails. Man, that's delicious, man. Oh. So again, do you have to use a rye this big? No, it's just what I had here, and I had a couple other ryes. One about the same, one a little bit less, but because I wanted to go classic, another rye I've got here is a Madeira cast finish rye, and I didn't want to go with that one because, again, I wanted to keep this as true to the original cocktail as possible. Then again, I wouldn't use I wouldn't use your typical bar rye, right? Because you're going to taste this cocktail, so you want a whiskey. Again, like they say, if you use wine in cooking, only use a wine that you would drink. While making a cocktail, only use a whiskey or whatever it calls for, a product that you would drink neat. If you wouldn't drink it neat, I wouldn't put it in a whiskey forward cocktail such as a Manhattan, Old Fashioned, or a booze forward cocktail like a martini, for instance. If you wouldn't drink it neat, I wouldn't use it in the cocktail. That should be the rule of thumb, in my opinion. Use whatever you want, but it should be something you're comfortable with drinking neat. Cheese, whiz, and bacon. That is good. There's a reason why classic cocktails are classic cocktails. I think a lot of places, well, myself, being a home bartender, but a lot of restaurants, bars, etc., want to, create their own signature. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But as I'm drinking this classic, because the truth is, I'm always doing something different with the Manhattan. It is absolutely beautiful. There's a reason why classic cocktails are classic cocktails. And as far as the measurements, again, that's really to taste. I tend to use less sweet vermouth than most when making a Manhattan. I tend to use less sugar than most, or less simple syrup than most when making an Old Fashioned. So again, that's really just to taste. If you want more sweet vermouth, put more in there. If you want less, use less. I used, I don't know, about 3/4 of an ounce, I think, for this one. Somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4. And some of the recipes call for 1 ounce, some 1.5 ounces. I don't like as much, so I just use a little bit in there. But again, you do need that little bit to balance your whiskey. Again, you add a little bit of sweetness, but also a little bit of acidity. So anyway, there you go. I am Tom the Whiskey Whisperer, whiskey evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker, purveyor of wisdom, and all around good guy. Sluncia. And I'll be back with a version of a Manhattan shortly. Cheers, honey tobacco. I am Tom, the Whiskey Whisperer, back again. So this is a variant of a classic Manhattan. Whether you want to call it a Manhattan or not, or whether you think it should, well, I'm going to leave that up to you. But here's what I did with this one. So I did use a rye again, but again, I wanted to take a few liberties. Here I'm using the Madeira cask finished rye from Lifted Spirits out of Kansas City. So I'm using 2 Kansas City products. This one's at 92.2 proof. So I did go down a little bit in the ABV, but I've used a whiskey that's very distinctive. And I think that's very important when making a cocktail like this. So I did use 1/4 ounce of sweet vermouth. I did cut down that a little bit because I added another product. J. Rieger's, another fine Kansas City distillery. I don't have any J. Rieger's whiskey on hand. I usually do, but I don't. So this is why I'm kind of combining 2 Kansas City products. This is their Cafe Amaro, a bittersweet coffee liqueur. So Amaro is an herbal liqueur. This one adds coffee to it, their Cafe Amaro, and it is at 62 proof. So I did add 1/4 ounce, as I said, of the sweet vermouth and 1/2 ounce of the Cafe Amaro to kind of change the game just a little bit. And the bitters, well, I had to think about that. I wasn't sure what bitters to add. Using the herbal Amaro, I have some options. I decided to go with the cardamom. To again add to that kind of herbal note or spice note, playing off both the Amaro and then the flavors of the Madeira cask finished rye. And it really does add a lot to the aromatics. You really feel that beautiful cardamom. Now, if you like cardamom, you're going to love this edition. If not, you're probably not going to want to do it. But like I said, don't be afraid to play around, because you never know if it's going to work until you try. Oh gosh, that's delicious. That's good. And you'd feel that herbal Amaro with the addition of that coffee. So let me give you a little info. Cafe Amaro is a one-of-a-kind take on the coffee liqueur. So I could have added just a straight coffee liqueur in this, but I wanted to use the Amaro because I wanted those herbal notes as well. Coffee liqueur that marries the herbal and slightly bitter characteristics of Amaro with a single origin cold brew coffee from Kansas City. So I've got an all Kansas City thing going on with the whiskey, other than the sweet vermouth. The sweet vermouth isn't Kansas City, but everything else is. Well, I guess the bitters are. But anyway, the main components are, let's just say. Anyway, sláinte. And the idea is that, although you don't want to stray too far from the original template, is there are things you can work with that will still accomplish the same thing. Is it still a true Manhattan? Well, honestly, probably not, but that's okay too. That's how, I mean, that's how new cocktails are invented. I don't know what I would call this yet at the moment, but again, it starts as a Manhattan and then becomes something else. And there are, I mean, there are just endless ways to go depending on what you have around you. Just again, if you're gonna leave the sweet vermouth in, you've got to use another product that's compatible. If you're going to take it out, you've got to use another product that adds a sweetness and acidity. There are some options. In the past, and to be honest with you, I've used port wine in place of sweet vermouth. I've used cream sherry in place of sweet vermouth. You can use Oloroso sherry. There are different things you can do that still accomplish the same thing. Add a little sweetness and a little acidity. Is it still a Manhattan? Well, I guess that depends on who you talk to, but the idea is still there. You're not straying too far from the original design. Wasn't sure if I would do, three Manhattans or do a classic and then two versions. I think we're just going to do the classic and the one version. Otherwise, the video is going to run way too long because I want to do the same thing with an old-fashioned. I want to do more or less a classic template old-fashioned and then kind of take some liberties with that as well. But I just want to kind of give you the idea that you don't have to do things exactly how they were written. Again, these cocktail recipes weren't handed down from God to Moses on stone tablets. There are folks that tell you have to do it exactly this way. You can only use this garnish or that garnish, and none of that is true. You can use whatever you have available to you. Make the cocktail yours. If you have certain ingredients, hey man, use them. You don't necessarily need to go out and spend a lot of money for specific ingredients to make a cocktail. And there are certain things you can do yourself. When I've tried to expand my bar, I've kind of bought things one at a time. I didn't have I started with, okay, I want this product, this product, this product. Okay, we need this. So we just get them one at a time and work with what you got until you get there. Now, to be honest with you, I am more of a whiskey neat guy most of the time. I'm pretty simple, but I do like classic cocktails. The Manhattan is probably my favorite. I do find myself making a lot of old fashions lately as well, mostly because I've found out I can do them my way. For the longest time, I hated the old fashioned because I just felt like it was too sweet. But then I found out it's only too sweet if somebody else makes them. I can make them my way and get the cocktail how I want it. Or the martini, for the longest time, I wasn't crazy about gin. So that I would make a vodka martini. But now as I've gotten older, I have found an appreciation, not quite a love for, but at least an appreciation for gin. So I do make a gin martini and a vodka martini. However, a martini isn't necessarily limited to those or the clear liquors per se. You can do a martini with a whiskey. It's the same idea. Just chill it. If you want to add the dry vermouth, yes. If you want to add olive juice, yes. Do it the way you want it. Many years ago, I did a version of a martini, of a dirty martini, but the whiskey of choice was I used Wild Turkey Rare Breed. And I made a dirty martini, so I referred to it as a dirty bird. And then from there, I did various riffs on that. With Irish whiskey, I call it a dirty Irishman, and you kind of see where I'm going from there. The idea is you can get as creative as you want to be. Be your own best bartender. There they go. That's my tagline. Be your own best bartender. That's what I learned during 2020 is I can no longer order a cocktail out because nobody makes them like I want them. If 2020 taught me anything, yeah, that's where it actually was 2020 when I found an appreciation for the old fashioned is I kept changing the proportions until I got it where I wanted it. I found a lot of recipes were calling for like 2 ounces of whiskey, 1.5 ounces, some even 2 ounces of simple syrup or equal parts of sugar cube, and it didn't seem ridiculously sweet to me. So I just kept cutting it down until I found the balance that worked for me. So I guess the message is, it may not be the cocktail that doesn't work for you. It may just be the design. It may be the proportions of certain ingredients that don't work. And find a way, if you like all the ingredients, just find a way to cut down on some of those till you get to the balance that works for you. For me, I like the idea of an old-fashioned, but every time I ordered one out, it just was too sweet for me. So I learned, okay, I like this, so I cut the amount of sugar down, usually up the amount of liquor until I got the balance that I wanted. Biscuits and gravy. That's a good drink, man. Yeah, I like the, so, like I said, I have a straight coffee liqueur in there, but I wanted to go with this one because I wanted both the coffee notes and the herbal notes, and I think that's why this cocktail works for me, is because I like those flavors and aromas, and I like how they work together in this particular cocktail. The herbal with the coffee, and then with the notes that the Madeira adds, the Madeira cask adds to this particular rye. It's just absolutely delicious. And then, of course, I added the cardamom bitters, which again adds to the aromatics, which adds to the appeal of the cocktail. So there you go. Adds a little bit of spice to the mix. So there you go. Anyways, I am Tom the Whiskey Whisperer, Whiskey Evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker, purveyor of wisdom, and thanks for watching my first my first Manhattan video, anyway. Well, my first combination Manhattan video, I guess, as we talk about cocktails. One more time with feeling, Tom the Whiskey Whisperer, Whiskey Evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker, purveyor of wisdom, and all around good guy, sláinte.